Hey there, this is Natalie, and of course I'm making a video today. This has been like the hypest day of 2020 so far for the ReZero web novel fans, because Tappei casually just dropped not one but 2 new chapters for Arc 6. I know it was only a couple of weeks ago that I made the video saying that I definitely thought he would be continuing with the web novel, even though the light novel's close to catching up. We had a couple of tweets from him that were kind of hinting that that was the case, and today it was confirmed with him releasing these new chapters. Now, there are summaries of these chapters available already on Reddit, and so if you want to read those, that's where you can find them. Some YouTubers have also already done some summary videos. I know Jake's123's done at least chapter 80, so definitely check out his videos on that. But I decided to do something a bit different, because before I got to see the summaries on Reddit, I decided to just kind of try and read chapter 80 using Google Translate. I use Google Translate probably more than the average person because I live in Italy and I don't yet speak perfect Italian, so I use it a lot for stuff just to do with living here, and also because, as you can see, I use a VTuber avatar. And a lot of the time I need to use Japanese websites for finding outfits for it and things like that, and tutorials and instructions, that kind of thing. So I think I'm either kind of used to the quirks of Google Translate more than normal, or actually it's really not that bad, because when I read this chapter and then read the summary, the perception of the chapter I had before reading the summary was actually exactly the same as what people who read Japanese were able to say occurred in it. So, you know, maybe Google Translate's good, or maybe I've just become the Google Translate whisperer. I don't know. But the reason I wanted to make the video this way is that there's some kind of funny stuff that comes up when you put it through here. And so while I'm giving you the summary of the chapter, it's just kind of entertaining to show some of the weirdness and the weird quirks that come up when Google Translate tries to make sense of Tappei's words. This video is just going to cover chapter 80, Death of the Spirit, and then I'll be making a second one for chapter 81. Obviously, this video contains spoilers for chapter 80 of Arc 6, and it will only make any sense at all if you're already up to date on Arc 6 itself. This chapter is mostly action, and so it's actually not too difficult to understand what's going on. We do lose a bit of the nuance of the dialogue, trying to read it this way, and so obviously until there's a full translation, which I believe Witch Cult Translations are already working on from what I've seen on Twitter, so hopefully it won't be too long. But until there's a full translation, we're not going to get the details of the jokes that characters are making with each other, or the all of the nuance of the conversations between characters like Ley Batenkaitos and Ram. But we can get the idea of what's happening, and we can definitely get the point of what happens in this chapter and chapter 81 in terms of moving the arc along. And if you're impatient like me, then, you know, that's kind of good enough for today. So, let's get into it. So, we open with the fight between Ram and Ley Batenkaitos, or Ley Batenkaitos. I think it was changed to Ley in the light novels, but in a lot of the translations I'd already read, he was called Ley Batenkaitos, and that's kind of what he's called in my head, so apologies if I keep saying Ley. They began their fight in the last chapter. That was published in November last year, so there's been a long wait since then. But if you can remember what was happening there, that's kind of helpful, because this one really just starts right in the thick of the action that began in chapter 79. Now, one of the first things you'll notice if you look at the wording here is that the translation likes to call Ram Lamb in some cases. Sometimes she's called Ram, sometimes it gets it right. It's really weird. But, you know, facing up and down the spiral staircase, Batenkaitos grunted at Lamb's sword. Batenkaitos feels ecstatic as she breathes in the emotions of anger, hatred and murder that she has towards her, a girl with strong emotions in her crimson eyes. Now, it does get the pronouns of the characters mixed up quite a lot. That's because in Japanese it's not quite as clearly distinguished between male and female pronouns in the language when it's written, so I think Google Translate just makes its best guess, and in this case it's referring to Batenkaitos as a she, though he is a boy. Now, throughout this fight, Ley is using the memories of Rem in order to both kind of predict how Ram's going to fight and to taunt her. But what's also interesting is that Ley talks about how in the past nobody has ever really wanted to fight him. There's never really been any repercussions for him eating people's memories, because everybody who knew the people he ate forgot about them. And so it's the appearance of Natsuki Subaru that has changed everything for him, because now not only Subaru but also Ram, who's been told about her sister having been eaten, are after him. So now Ley Batenkaitos is talking about how he's even more obsessed with Subaru than his sister Louis was. And of course, if you've read the rest of Arc 6, you know that Louis was obsessed with him enough to possess him. So, you know, everybody's got a bit of a hard-on for Subaru in this scene. And he says, your sister will understand, right? Because, of course, from Rem's memories, he knows that Rem also loved Subaru. But Ram tells him to die while screaming like a pig. And here we get something that's probably funny in Japanese, but Google Translate has made a bit of a hash of it, so we've got, I've reconsidered it. If it's imitated by pigs or less, pigs would be a good nuisance. It's probably some kind of nice snarky quip from Ram, but butchered by the old Google Translate, but it's doing its best, so, you know, let's push on. And now I'm taking away from this bit here that because Rem looked up to Ram so much, Ley Batenkaitos is expecting Ram to be more terrifying than she actually is. It says here, Lamb's physique is a big deal. There is no mercy and no hesitation in killing. However, Batenkaitos can still be avoided comfortably. Why? It's easy. I know my sister is even more amazing, this one. Many memories stored inside Batenkaitos. Among them is a passionate thing that longs for Ram with her sister and is impatient with her infinite possibilities. The insatiable trust and expectation of Ram in that memory transmitted the difference with Ram in front of him, sadly and accurately, to Batenkaitos. But then Ram tells him, your sister without horns is nothing more than a mess that can be replaced by Ram. And so, of course, we know that Ram lost her horn, but before that was extremely strong. And Rem, although she was aware of this, still really saw Ram as the stronger sister. So something in her memories is perhaps making Batenkaitos expect more from Ram than Ram can actually deliver. But Ram is being buffed by Subaru's Corleonis ability, which is his version of the authority of greed that he got by killing Regulus Corneus in Arc 5. Now, this allows him to not only buff his teammates, but also to see in his mind lights that represent where they are. And that's something that's going to be important later in the chapter. Now, this does depend on Subaru's proximity to the people that he's working with, and that's also going to be something we're going to see in the next scene as being important. He needs to stay near to the tower so that Ram can continue to receive this benefit in her fight against Ley. We see this further along here as Ram and Ley continue to fight, and she manages to draw blood on his face. He believes that knowing Ram's fighting style as he does, thanks to having Rem's memories, he should be able to predict what she's going to do. And as it says here, there was no future to suffer this wound. But Ram has been buffed, so she is still able to attack him, despite the fact she's in her weakened state, due to being in the Pleiades watchtower with the miasma of the witch, which has been affecting Ram, plus the fact that she hasn't been able to get mana from Roswell like she normally does, and has been kind of relying on healing from other people like Julius and Emilia. Ram's been far from her best for the whole of this excursion into the tower, and yet she's finding herself able to fight against Ley. But there are some weird lines here. Did you mean to uncover Lam's bullion? If so, comedy. Lam's possibilities are endless. Yeah, I don't know what that's all about. When I first read it, I thought bullion was maybe just a mistranslation, because Google Translate was seeing the word lamb and thinking, what would go with lamb? Something to do with cooking. But actually, as we look a bit further, there's more kind of food analogies, because we're dealing with the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, and so maybe it really did mean bullion. We'll have to wait and see till there's a proper translation, but it's kind of interesting. Angry and hatred are spices for even more deliciousness, but the spices are too strong and the dishes that are too sensitive are ruined. For my sister who doesn't cook, I don't know at all. But then Ram replies, that's not the case. What's to hide? Ram's specialty is steamed potatoes. But then we get one of the weirdest lines in this. Before the scene changes and we leave Ley and Ram continuing their battle with no particular resolution. And that is, Ram says, be at best, Barris, which I guess is her talking to Subaru. It's, it would normally be Barisu. He, but it means she, called out to a boy who wasn't here and made a cold look with ruthless determination. And then she says, in this translation, from Google, though it kind of feels like this might even be something that Tappei knew it was gonna say. I don't know, this is just too funny to be a coincidence. There's just this line with, the fate community is horrifying though. The fate community is horrifying though. I guess Ram's not a fan. But that's all we get from the battle between Ram and Ley Batenkaitos for this chapter. And now the scene changes to outside of the tower, where Subaru, Beatrice and Meili are fighting against Shaula, who's turned into a giant scorpion. And now we do get some interesting interventions from Google Translate here. Whenever Subaru calls Beatrice Beako, it decides to translate it as bear child. Bear child. And Meili as Mary. So this looked very weird when I first read it. Bear child, Mary, surpass. And they're all riding on hungry horse kings. That's those centaur monsters that we've seen previously in Arc 6. And because of Meili's ability to control and talk to witch beasts, they now are riding on these things that Subaru was so terrified of earlier in the arc. I think it's really cool. They're riding around on these like centaurs with no heads that are on fire and have big mouths in their torsos. It's pretty metal. And while they describe the scorpion and talk about how they're approaching it, Subaru also explains what they're waiting for Emilia to do. He believes that if Emilia can capture the final layer of the tower, she'll be given the opportunity to rewrite the rules of the tower. He believes this because it's built into the rules of the tower that you can break the rules. And with this being the final rule, Subaru believes that's only included in the rules because it's supposed to be done. He's explaining to Beatrice that the fact that the final rule of the tower is that you can break the rules means that that's what they're supposed to do. He thinks it's a reward for people who can capture the tower and clear it by legitimate means. Because Emilia is the only one who's managed to get past Reid Astrea, who in this translation is referred to as the Raid most of the time, we know that she's got the best chance of getting further up the tower. And so his plan has been for Emilia to take on the last trial by herself, because she's the only one who can go past Reid's layer. And when she achieves whatever she has to do there, she's going to change the rules of the tower and save everybody. He's explaining that to Meili and Beatrice while they're still fighting against Shaula. Now, during this fight, they have to stay in the vicinity of the tower so that Subaru can continue to use Corleonis both to buff Ram, as we talked about before, and so that he can continue to see where the other people in the tower are by the faint lights that he sees that give him an indication of their location. However, it says that he's not completely familiar with this authority yet, so he's still figuring out the details, and he doesn't really know how far away from the watchtower he can get before he won't be able to see these indicators that his friends are alive and their locations in the tower. It mentions Emilia and Julius. Emilia, as we know, is trying to defeat the final trial of the tower, and that's what we'll see in the next scene. And Julius is currently fighting against Reid Astrea, and we'll see that in chapter 81. And here we see it confirmed that Ram wouldn't be able to beat Ley Batenkaitos without basically all of the advantages that could possibly be afforded to her, and so Subaru needs to take over the burden that's always afflicting her, and that's why he can't leave the tower in a detour. And now we have Meili and Beatrice working together to attack Shaula. Meili is commanding some small flying animals, and what Beatrice does is use some gravity-defying magic, some of her yin magic, to make the creatures heavier. They've already tried to attack Shaula in various ways, and they've noticed that she isn't good at consistently dealing with the first attack of a new kind that she gets. Meili's controlling the beasts and making them attack Shaula, and Beatrice is making them much, much heavier so that when they do collide with her, they do more damage. And while that's going on, Subaru gets a little bit of a scare because he's using his Corleonis to check up on the people in the tower, and he sees Emilia's light go out. It says the colour and the intensity of the light will change if you're violently excited. The reverse is also true. So does the disappearance of Emilia's reaction mean her death? But then Subaru thinks that the speed at which the reaction disappeared was too fast. Even if Emilia encounters a terrifying enemy that instantly extinguishes her existence, and even if it falls into the hands of that enemy, it seems unlikely that she will disappear without resistance. Subaru doesn't want to think this, and so he refuses to believe it and believes that Emilia has instead just gone out of his range of perception and that she's still alive. And we'll see in the next scene that he is correct. And now we see just what Emilia has encountered. And this is probably the most important part of this chapter. Emilia has come face to face with the dragon Volcanica. It says, in this kingdom of Lagunica, there is nothing in the world who doesn't know its name. If Jealousy Witch is a symbol of fear, it should be a symbol of hope and trust. This existence has continued to accumulate such achievements for the world. The name of that mighty and great being is Shinryu Volcanica. Ruminating his name, Emilia feels that her whole body has cooled quickly, and then it talks about the kind of tension that Emilia feels just in the presence of this dragon. It says that it seems that even breathing must be done without permission of the other party. The presence of a real dragon was so prominent that it had taken control of the world. Breathtakingly, Emilia looks at the whole body of Volcanica again. The blue, deeply coloured scales shimmered like jewels, and each one seemed sharper than the forged treasure sword. The thick forefoot and hindfoot have dark rock-like claws, and the face that resembled a dragon has a long-lived golden twin that has stared at incredible years. I think the long-lived golden twin refers to its eyes. Its head has two large thick horns that are as white as freshly squeezed milk. It says it's somewhere between 15 and 16 meters long, but the way that it's kind of positioned in the tower, it's kind of hard to get the sense of the scale of it. It must have been for Volcanica that it was made in an open space, talking about the tower. And so Emilia thinks to herself, the third layer is the wise man, I guess, who we've been referring to as the sage. The second layer is Reid, and the first layer is Volcanica. Maybe all the Saneketsu of ancient times are involved in the test of the tower. So that's referring to the three people who were responsible for sealing the Witch of Envy, the sage, who they believed was Shaula, but they now know was Flugel. And the trial relating to Flugel was the star-based one that Subaru solved right near the beginning of the arc. The second one, Reid Astrea, who was the sword saint at the time. And the third one, the dragon Volcanica. And Emilia's just figured that out. However, Shaula said it was actually Flugelhorn's credit. I guess that's Google Translate playing with Flugel's name. The Reid, was very violent and sullen, and Volcanica was a dragon, not human. Still, if everyone is involved here, Emilia thinks, it's really nice to be good friends even after hundreds of years. So Emilia thinks it's sweet. And Emilia likes the dragon because Emilia likes beings who value promises. This is something that we know about Emilia because she's a Spirits Arts user, and she had a conversation with Subaru in Arc 4, which was actually in the most recent chapter I read in my web novel reading of Arc 4, Chapter 6, where she discusses with Subaru why she thinks promises, oaths and pacts are very important. And now she decides to announce to Volcanica that she's come to take the exam and she wants to challenge it. I don't know what kind of difficult examination, but please hurry up. If I don't do my best, Subaru and the others will be in trouble. Anything, come on. By tapping her cheeks with both hands, Emilia regained her feelings of resignation. But the dragon just stares at Emilia with its golden eyes. Without exaggeration, the eyes feel so deep that, I guess, Emilia feels like she's likely to be sucked in. It was 400 years ago that he fought the Witch of Jealousy and signed an agreement with the Kingdom of Lagunica, but this great dragon has lived much longer than that 400 years. That's what the twins, I guess his eyes, have been looking at the world for years that may approach 1,000 years. Emilia keeps talking to the dragon. She says, some people hate me because they're half-elves. I guess because she's a half-elf, another bit of a mix-up with the translation. Some are mean like Echidna, but like Subaru, Ram, Beatrice and others, there are some children who are expecting me. It's kind of a weird translation, but we can get the gist. While talking, Emilia touched the crystal stone on her chest with her finger. Emilia's precious family, who are still asleep, were the first to affirm Emilia, who was often seen with coloured glasses. I guess she's talking about Puck. The tower, including its family, has friends who recognise Emilia. That's why you shouldn't look at it with any eyes, Emilia screamed in front of the once pressured Shinryu. And it basically talks about how Emilia, despite feeling the pressure from the dragon, so much that her limbs are shaking and that she feels like her existence could be swallowed by the presence of the dragon, she refuses to lose. She squeezes her fists and makes her bluish-purple eyes shine. And now the dragon blinks slowly, bathing in Emilia's gaze. Then Volcanica moves the dragon's jaw magnificently, and he speaks. But all he says is, "Thou shalt reach the top of the tower, almighty petitioner who steps further. I, Volcanica, by the ancient oath, the aspirations of those who reach the summit are questioned." So basically, I did need a bit of help from the summary to understand this bit. He's basically asking what the intentions of the person who wants to reach the summit are. But that's the only thing Volcanica ever says in this chapter. Emilia at first wonders if she's broken some kind of etiquette and should have introduced herself properly when she first met Volcanica. And so she says, "I'm sorry, I'm Emilia, just Emilia. Hey, there are a lot of kids who don't remember me right now, so I'm told to prove it. I'm in trouble, but it's Emilia." And this is, of course, because Emilia has had her name eaten. That happened in a previous chapter, and so currently she's in a similar position to Julius, where she still has her memories, but people other than Subaru don't remember her anymore. Volcanica remained silent. And it says, if this was Subaru, he would have been pessimistic that he was disqualified from taking more exams by skipping the first greeting, but Emilia doesn't think so. Emilia thinks that even if something's wrong, if she apologises, the other person is not so ruthless. So she doesn't think her disrespect bought Volcanica's silence at this time. She thought it was possible that Volcanica was angry, or maybe it was worse than angry. But then she hurries forward to touch Volcanica. She gently reaches out and touches the scale of her opponent's forefoot. The scales are as cold as ice or cold steel. How much time do you have to stay stagnant to lose so much heat? And it's basically saying that although the dragon isn't biologically dead and it still has its physical presence, being here for so long, the ancientness of the dragon means that the dragon's spirit has died. That's, why the chapter's called Death of the Spirit. And the effect of this is basically that Volcanica, at least, we don't know if this is the real Volcanica or kind of an imitation of Volcanica created for the trials. We don't know that. But this Volcanica is basically senile. He's kind of got dragon Alzheimer's. He repeats after Emilia touches him, "I, Volcanica, by the ancient oath, the aspirations of those who reach the summit are questioned." Volcanica repeats once again, looking down at Emilia, touching, I think this should be his forefoot, but I don't know if the gender of the dragon has ever been properly explained, but I think he's always been referred to as a he before in translations, but he's a dragon. Welcome words are repeated at a frequency that should be called repeatedly. It wasn't to blame Emilia for lacking greetings. And Emilia's conclusion is, not the physical death, but the mental death also attacked the long-lived dragon. And it came down as a challenge for Emilia, who had to overcome more tests. And the chapter ends with a similar ending to what we saw when the previous two trials were introduced at the end of their chapters. And so it says, large library Pleiades, the first layer, mere exam. Time limit, survival time of friends. The number of challenges is unknown. Challenger, 1 person. Test content, unknown. Test start. And of course this is really just telling us that Emilia has so little information to go on, and as far as she can tell, the survival time limit that she has is while her friends are able to survive the fights that they're currently engaged in. She's got to do something with Volcanica, but Volcanica doesn't remember what the test is anymore and doesn't seem to really be responding to Emilia's presence at all. And so this is an altogether new challenge for her to face. Will this be the strangest challenge that Emilia's had to take under the guise of a trial? I guess we'll find out. But for now, that's the end of my read through of this automatically translated version of chapter 80, Death of the Spirit. I hope you were able to get the gist of what happens in the chapter. As I said, I have read the summary as well, so I was informing what I was telling you as we were going through the chapter from what people who've read it properly in Japanese have said happens in it. But I think it was possible to tell what was happening from this Google Translate version. And also, if we hadn't looked at this version, we wouldn't know about the fate community being horrifying, or that this novel has a character in it called Bearchild. So, there was plenty to enjoy here. Now, I'm going to edit this one, and then I'm going to go through chapter 81 for you. So I hope you've enjoyed this summary, because there's another one coming up soon.